You just have these characters and a scenario that we just literally never really seen. I remember the amount of people that were like, "You're gonna make a show about bankers? Like, why would we want to watch that?" But actually, Mickey and Conrad subverted expectation of that genre in a really brilliant way, and I'm very proud of the output.
Can you introduce yourself and what you do?
Hi, my name's David, David P. Davis. I'm an executive producer, currently the creative director of a production company backed by ITV Studios called 5 Acts Productions.
How long have you worked in TV?
Good question. So, on and off I've been working. I worked in non-scripted first, which is not a lot of people know that I worked in non-scripted, but so I worked in non-scripted. I started around 2004-ish. So what is that, like nearly 20 years, 18 years, something like that, long time.
What do you love about what you do?
Good question. Like, I just mostly, and since I've transitioned to scripted, which is where I always wanted to be, like I went to film school originally, and I bounced around from company to company, but in scripted, what I've always loved from a very young age is making up stories and just thinking about like what could be. From a very, very young age, I've always just loved storytelling, and that is what I get to do on a daily basis. So I'm blessed.
Nice. What are your top memories from working in TV?
My best memories are the first job that I ever had, which was working on a show called T4, which was like a magazine show on Channel 4. So these are in my non-scripted days. This was the very first job I ever had. And T4 was like a magazine show, and it used to have like, sort of like Big Breakfast or whatever it was, so it's like every day it would have, or every week it would have different celebrities. So I was fresh out of film school, 21, 22, like, and all of a sudden, like, I was like doing interviews with like David Beckham and Victoria Beckham. I went on tour with Fat Man Scoop. Like, it was just every week, it was just like an insane amount of guests. We would do like T4 on the beach and get to meet all the pop stars and stuff. And yeah, like, I didn't really appreciate it actually at the time, because you just never do. You're like, yeah, of course, like, this is amazing. But like, when you look back on it, it was like, yeah, actually it was like a very, very super cool time.
What are your biggest achievements from working in TV?
I would say that probably, I mean, it depends. Like, I always find that question kind of subjective, and it depends on what you mean by achievements, really. Like, actually just kind of getting my first job and being able to consistently work for 20 years in TV is an achievement, because it's hard work. It's it's fixed term contracts and freelance rates and all of these sorts of things, and there's lots of problems within our industry that we're all trying to fix. So even just the fact that I'm sat here now and being able to talk to people like you is amazing. I would say that probably working on Doctor Who in the script department was big. I launched Peter Capaldi's Doctor with Stephen Moffat. Well, he launched it, I helped him. Nice. And obviously that's a big mainstream international show. So that was a big achievement. And then just most recently, like, I've just finished exec producing a show called Industry for HBO and the BBC, made by Bad Wolf, about young grads who enter the world of finance. And that was kind of one of the first sort of shows that got real kind of critical success, 5-star reviews in papers, and a show that, like, my peers, agents, directors, actors, all when they talk to me, they're like, we love that show. So for the mainstream appeal, like Doctor Who, and for the critic appeal, like, I would say Industry are my two biggest achievements, probably.
How did you start out in the industry as a researcher for BBC? Have you always wanted to work in the script and development department?
Okay, so you know, like I said, so like not a lot of people know this because my CV just like I don't really put it on my CV anymore. But like my first job, like I've just told you guys, it actually wasn't working as a researcher for the BBC. My very first job was, like I said, working on T4, and the way that I got that is everybody's route into TV is always really different, right? Like so, there's a script editor that I used to work with on Doctor Who, Nick Lambon, great guy. We used to do like talks for people who were coming up in the industry, and I think when we were on Doctor Who they had some kind of arrangement with one of the local unis where we would get interns who would come in and we would always give the spiel, and every single one of them would always ask us how you get into TV, and that's a question that is asked, you know, all the time, and the truth is there's not one route that is the same into TV. Everybody's route is slightly different, and often you can't imitate. And mine is definitely it definitely follows that pattern. So there was something called Television and Young People, which was the educational arm of the Guardian Television Festival, Edinburgh Television Festival. And I was like a delegate when I was at university, right? We went up there, we had talks. I remember Graham Norton gave us a talk. There were some Coronation Street writers who gave talks, all that sort of thing, and it was amazing. And then when I was finishing uni, to film school in Wales, they ran a competition where they were going to put 12 people who had been past delegates of the TVYP scheme into work placements, and you had to come up with a TV show, and then there were rounds of like interviews with various different production companies, and I basically was one of those 12 people. So my very first job, the way that I got it was by winning a competition, and like I say, you can't imitate that really. That's luck. That's luck.
Nice. How did you work your way up in the industry?
So there's no special technique here. Like, it's just hard work. You have to really want it. You have to be proactive. There's lots of fixed term contracts. There's lots of freelance contracts. It's really hard to get like a staff job. I didn't come up through through a standard route, or like I didn't necessarily have a background that is similar to a lot of the backgrounds of people that you see working in TV today. So it was just lots of emailing. Like I used to kind of guess people's email addresses, ask them if I could go out for coffees with them, just continually networking and essentially like asking for the opportunity to keep working and continually doing it and taking jobs. It wasn't necessarily the thing that I wanted to do the most, but because of my background and stuff, I had to keep working. I had bills to pay. You know, I had a young family at some point that I mouths that I needed to feed and all of that sort of stuff. So I bounced around on all sorts of jobs that were all amazing at the time because they did exactly what they needed to do. But, you know, I've worked for digital poker stations. I worked on Trisha Goddard. I worked for Blue Peter and Newsround and then Holby. And so I've done all sorts of things just to keep working within the industry. So it's just, it's hard work and dedication and graft, really.
How has the industry changed since you started?
Specifically looking at scripted TV, I would say that the most amount of change that I've seen since I've started working in TV is the budgets. I think the streamers, SVODs, Amazon, Netflix, Disney Plus, you know, they've kind of changed the game in terms of the budgets, and so therefore the quality of the output that you can do. Like, gone are the days of you being able to make shows for XX bucks. You know, it now costs XXX pounds to make a TV show, and so it's harder to get away the kind of mid-price TV shows and things like that. But at the same time, we are in a gold rush, really. It's like the golden age of TV right now. Like, if you want to be making television and you want to be working in television, there is so much content that is being made. You know, we don't just have the 5 channels or, you know, even 4 channels. I sort of still can remember Channel 5 being launched within my lifetime and stuff. So, like, it's no longer, it's just like the case of 5 channels, and if the traditional broadcasters don't want your content, then you can't make it. You know, now you've got the streamers and they're all international and they have footprints everywhere. I was speaking to agents yesterday who were based in South Africa who were asking whether I would be interested in making content for the domestic African channels. It is literally a gold rush right now. So it's good. It's good. We're in a bubble, and bubbles tend to burst. So you need to keep on it and strike while the iron's hot. But right now, like, life in TV is amazing.
Let's discuss Industry, the TV show. What is it?
Industry as a TV show I was the executive producer on. Made for the BBC and HBO by a production company called Bad Wolf, which was run by Jane Tranter, started by Jane Tranter and Julie Gardner. They are responsible, they would probably hate me to say this, but they are essentially responsible for the TV industry being as successful as it is today here in Wales. They brought back, along with Russell T Davies, they brought back Doctor Who, which completely regenerated the South Wales drama scene.
Yeah, agree there.
So I was working with Jane and with Julie. Julie tends to be based more out in America, so specifically with Jane. On this show called Industry, which was written by Mickey and Conrad. Mickey Down and Conrad Kay, two fantastic writers who are ex-bankers. And Industry looks at getting full grads as they try to make it in the world of banking in financial institutions. I always kind of describe it as like sex, drugs and banking, really. So our way into the project was with a young black woman, American, called Harper, who comes over from America to work in the premier financial institution of Pierpoint, which is an investment bank in London. And we're kind of looking at what you will do to get ahead. It also looks at, like, you know, internships and graduate culture and, you know, pulling all-nighters. So it's very, very translatable to all different industries, which is why I actually really love the title of Industry, because, you know, most people who work in a sector, you know, they call their thing the industry. So whether it be, you know, the music business or the construction industry or whatever it is. And in those fields, to get ahead, young people have to put themselves through all sorts of incredible and insane things. And we just shine a light on that culture.
You probably answered this, but how did Industry come to life?
So it was... It started just before I actually joined Bad Wolf, so I'm not 100 on this. I believe it started with a conversation between Jane and HBO, and they were talking about trying to set something in the world of a financial institution. Mickey and Conrad were already writing a project for Bad Wolf in a different space. But Jane was aware of their background and asked whether they would be interested in pivoting and putting together a show like Industry. They had, in their previous lives, already written something along the same lines. So there was an instant synergy between them. They wrote a script, and the network HBO loved it. I was working for a show called Electric Dreams at the time for Left Bank. They are a fantastic production company who make The Crown. And I was doing the first season of that. Industry, Bad Wolf, approached me. I turned them down because I was going to do the second season of Electric Dreams, but for one reason or another that didn't materialise, and Bad Wolf came back to me and asked me if I would be interested in joining the project. So I did, and we did a writer's room, standard affair, like a kind of a writer's room, put together another episode and the storylines for the rest of the season, put it in, and kind of the rest is history. HBO loved it, the BBC came on board, and we've just wrapped our second season now.
What do you love about Industry?
There's two things, on screen and off screen. And on screen, I love the storytelling that came out of the mind primarily of Mickey and Conrad. You have black characters that you've just never seen before, or that you don't think exist in quite the same way. Like Harper is, extremely capitalist. We joked about whether she was the sort of person who might even vote for Trump. And our other black character, Gus, compared Margaret Thatcher with Jesus. It's like you just have these characters and a scenario that we just literally never really seen. I remember the amount of people that were like, "You're gonna make a show about bankers? Like, why would we want to watch that?" But actually, Mickey and Conrad subverted expectation of that genre in a really brilliant way, and I'm very proud of the output. And then on like a personal level, like off screen, it was somewhat of a training ground for a lot of first time people. Like it was the first show that I had ever executive produced. We had directors who had got some amazing independent films under their belts, but were newer in kind of the TV directing space. It was the first time that Mickey and Conrad had been showrunners in quite the same way. We had costume designers who stepped up and makeup designers and all of this sort of stuff. So it was just like off screen was a huge feat. And I'm incredibly proud of the on-screen output.
What did you do as an executive producer specifically?
It depends whether you're talking about it in America or whether you're talking about it in Britain. Sort of both jobs in both countries are the same, is that you are ultimately responsible for the creative output that goes on screen. And you're also responsible for bringing the project in on time, on budget. Now, in America, the executive producers also tend to be writers. So it's a slightly different thing. This is happening more and more and more in the United Kingdom. Also, by the way, this isn't a catch-all. Like every single show is put together slightly differently, and there'll be non-writing execs in America, and there are definitely writing execs like Mickey and Conrad were on Industry in the United Kingdom. And so the executive producer, like by and large, within the United Kingdom, is there to bring together the best creative people that they can find. So they will work with the best writers, ensure that whatever the story is being told in the best possible way, to make sure that they were working with the best directors and that the director's vision and the writer's vision is that there's a synergy there, to find the best heads of department. So whether it be costume, makeup, sound, production design, whatever it is, to make sure that you're bringing in the right people who all, essentially it boils down to keeping the vision of the show on track and making sure that everybody is working to the same vision. And with the budgets and stuff, again, it's like you're ultimately responsible for the budget, but really you're responsible for bringing in people who manage that very well. It depends on the type of producer. You can get editorial producers and more line producers, but you'll have a head of production and things like that, and production execs who are in charge of the day-to-day running of the budget. But when it comes to, we need to blow up a helicopter or we need to spend this much money on catering, like what would you rather do? It's the executive producer who can decide what is the most important thing in that scenario.
What is 5 Productions and what can we look out for?
Good question. So 5 Production is my own label at ITV Studios. So it's my company that I've set up. 5 when I first started working in scripted, it was because of a guy called John York. He wrote a book, or he's written a book called Into the Woods, and it's just like this guy's a whiz. He was the head of continuing drama when I first started in scripted TV. He was responsible for bringing the Slaters in to EastEnders, I think, back in the days when everybody watched EastEnders, and he pulled together all different sorts of storytelling from storytelling methods from all these different avenues, you know, whether it be the writer's journey or Robert McKee's story or whatever it is. And as I was coming up through the industry, the thing that was the most important, not the most important thing to us, but the story and structure guide that we used was 5 acts. We would put things into a 5-act structure. And John will be the first person to tell you that if things are working, who really cares about structure? But if things aren't working, if you're reading a script and it dips or whatever it is, you can almost use tracing paper as with using 5 acts, and you can see what part of the story needs work. And it's become my mantra, you know, just like people know me as a story guy. That's kind of my talent, I think. If I have one, it's really weird talking about yourself in that way, right? But like, if I had a talent, it would be in story and structure. And so 5 acts seem like a good natural name. What's coming up? It's really early days for me right now. I love being in production. I love making things. I love watching things that I've made. But if I'm honest, the bit of the job that I love the most is working with writers on their passion projects, and helping them tell the best stories that they can possibly tell. And right now, for the next 18 months or so, that is the bit that I'm doing right now. I'm meeting with agents, I'm meeting with writers, I'm finding bits of IP, whether it be books or articles or whatever it is, that I can turn into a TV show. So what we've got coming up, I can't really say, it's really early doors, but I am very busy in the best kind of first world champagne problems type way, meeting, reading, and working, developing up projects.
What books should filmmakers be reading?
I've already mentioned John York, who was, I mean, he would never say that he was, but in sometimes from afar, but sometimes very close up, he was like a mentor to me, and has really actually shaped my career in a really brilliant way. And he used to run these courses at the BBC, just like writers' courses. And then he turned those courses into a book called Into the Woods by John York. And especially if you work in the UK TV industry, but if you just work in the TV industry full stop, I would say scripted specifically. Although what's really interesting about John York is he talks about how story and structure can be applied to something like The Apprentice. And you might not really notice it at first, but basically all Apprentice episodes follow a very particular pattern. And all of those patterns, if you put the tracing paper of 5 acts across them, they fit that mold. Same with Love Island and things like that. All of these shows follow, everything's story and structure. Everything that works and everything that we care about is story and structure. You need brilliant characters as well, of course you do. But it helps transform. Love Island and Apprentice and things like that are cast brilliantly, but what keeps you engaged is like, who's going to get fired? Are they going to find that missing ornament, or like whatever it is? All of that stuff gets traced back into story and structure. So there's Into the Woods. Robert McKee has a book that everyone should read as well called Story. Pretty sure it's just called Story. And the other one that's a really good one is A Writer's Journey, or The Writer's Journey.
Can we talk your experience with diversity? What advice would you have to people from underrepresented backgrounds?
Okay, so like diversity, it's very kind of zeitgeisty at the moment. Everyone's talking about diversity. I mean, the truth is people have been talking about diversity kind of since I got into the industry. And by and large, like, I've always been, especially black man, I could probably count on one hand the amount of black men I've actually worked with in my time. And so, you know, obviously for obvious reasons, I mean, like when you look at me or whatever, it's something that like I feel very strongly about. There's some amazing organisations out there. Simone Pennant at the TV Collective, I think she's an MBE now. Is that right, Simone? You're an MBE, something like that? For her work in the diverse space and just trying to make things more inclusive. And, you know, so many different companies now have a director of diversity or an inclusion officer or whatever it is. So the industry is is making strides to. I was going to say right or wrong, but it's not necessarily a wrong in that way, but it's something that's been overlooked in a weird way. Like, I just, at the very, if you look at the demographics of the United Kingdom and you break it down by percentage and stuff, the percentage of the population, it's not the same percentage that are working in film and TV, and that needs to change. But it's a long process, and actually it starts from the ground up. We need to be going. Sometimes this is a slightly unpopular thing to say, but like we can't really fix this overnight. Like, we need to be going into schools, into communities, and telling people who have never really thought that they could possibly have a career in the arts in this way. We need to show them that it is possible. Bad Wolf has Screen Alliance Wales, which do amazing things in this space as well. Just trying to go out and engage with the local schools. They're forever getting workshops and bringing people in to look at the studios at Bad Wolf and stuff. And it is that, like, it's like a 10-year problem to fix it. People are doing it, and I hope we start seeing the fruits of it. And also just more people who look like me, like you, who get into positions of power, will help with this as well, just so that it shows, the younger generations that it is possible.